Thank you very much for coming. On behalf of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the Science Panel for the Amazon, I welcome you to this event. It's a very important event for us because we are going to present to you a policy paper on indigenous territories and protected areas, and we will also present to you a white paper on knowledge dialogues. This is an important dimension of the work of the Science Panel of the Amazon. Uh, we have very little time, so I'm going to be very rigorous with my panelists because we only have 40 minutes. But without much to do, I would like to introduce our co-chair of the Science Panel of the Amazon, Marielos Peña-Claros, who will be leading us on the debate. Marielos.
Thank you, Emma, and good afternoon to all of you. Can you hear me well? Okay. So, good afternoon to all of you. I would like to welcome you all to this session, and I would also like to thank our hosting, OTCA and BIT, for allowing for hosting us today. As Emma mentioned. I want to explain very briefly about the Science Panel for the Amazon. It was launched in 2019 by the Sustainable Development Solution Network. It is composed by over 280 researchers that work in the whole Amazon region. And it has produced an assessment report in 2021, which is considered the encyclopedia of the Amazon. And since then, we have been producing several policy briefs. Today, we are going to be launching one of them on protected areas and indigenous territories. We wanted to produce this policy brief because protected areas and indigenous territories, they make up 50%. They cover 50% of the area of the Amazon. So they're really extremely important for the conservation of the Amazon. But there are challenges, and we are going to cover some of them later on during the presentation. And then we're going to go and talk about the knowledge dialogues, the white paper promoting knowledge dialogues and Amazonia. This is part of the engagement strategy of the panel to engage with different actors, different groups of people that are playing a crucial role in the conservation of the Amazon. I think André is going to be talking more about the knowledge dialogues, but I think this is a word that sounds better. This concept sounds much better in Spanish, which is diálogos de saberes, because saberes is more than just knowledge, it's more than just conocimiento. So we have to think about a proper word in Dutch. But with this, I would like to offer you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marielos. I'm very pleased to introduce to Carmen Josse. She's a biologist. She's a director of Fundación EcoCiencia in Ecuador, lead author of the Science Panel of the Amazon, and lead author of this policy paper. Carmen.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for being here. Creo que voy a hablar en español.
And I'd rather speak in Spanish because I want Gregorio to be able to understand clearly as well as all others. The slides are in English, but I think this is going to be best for every one of us. Very quickly, I just wanted to raise that back in 2021, when we finished publishing the Amazon report prepared by the scientific panel, we addressed this issue of indigenous territories and protected areas because it is indisputable that they are the heart of the Amazon, even today. And it was addressed thoroughly in that paper with a historic evolution in this policy brief. These issues are presented much more concisely, with a special focus on highlighting the urgency of trying to find solutions and recommendations. So this is all I wanted to say. This policy brief was prepared in a collaboration with Raquel Tupirambá, a Brazilian indigenous leader, and all the names that you see on screen, some of them members of the science panel as well, but some others aren't. What about the key messages of this policy brief? We would like to highlight yet once again the importance of the Amazonia, not only because of its biodiversity and varied ecosystems and the like, but also from a cultural, evolutionary, and ecological standpoint. With all the connections that these ecosystems have in this huge surface that remains quite interconnected to date and in very good conditions. We've said and heard repeatedly over the different panels that right now the biome, the ecosystems, or the region may be the one with the highest importance and the one that presents the most urgent challenge globally, because it goes a long way in regulating climate worldwide. Therefore, we need to do everything humanly possible to guarantee that it continues to perform as it has performed today with all its complexities. To begin with, there is a part that is already protected. It's been proven, and there's extensive literature, including scientific literature, that tell us that indigenous peoples have protected the territory as well as the protected areas, and together they account for 50% of the Amazonia. So, based on this urgency, we need to focus on that, but they are over there and they need to be strengthened from different approaches, from different angles, we could say. I also wanted to highlight yet once again the key role that indigenous peoples have played in the Amazonia to preserve our forests, and have thus mitigated to a large extent the emissions recorded there, because there has been a serious deforestation phenomenon over the last few years. I would like to underscore once again that the connectivity or the connection between protected areas and indigenous territories is a fact. It is there, and together they cover a huge surface that offers a great opportunity to work in a comprehensive, articulated manner, thinking of the areas that remain in good conditions. We have a couple of statistics on screen, but basically, the most important takeaway, once again, has to do with understanding that in these indigenous territories and the protected areas, there has been a great conversion, while outside those territories, a great part of the Amazonia has been converted, transformed, or degraded. I don't think we need to reiterate the threats that are huge, but we've heard about the threats in many panels throughout this COP. But these issues are becoming more and more urgent and pressing, because we do not only face anthropic threats on a day-to-day basis, but they are also compounded by this climate change phenomena that result in greater droughts and much more intense and longer dry seasons. Just for you to get a general idea of this is the transformation that the Amazonia has undergone in 39, 40 years. I'm almost over. And these are the changes we've witnessed that resulted in the loss of 88 million hectares of forests. So our policy brief includes many recommendations, many of them related to strengthening and supporting indigenous territories, indigenous organizations and peoples, and promoting bioeconomies and forest economies, and actually exploiting the connection among those protected areas and indigenous territories to keep on strengthening these ties, to preserve this connection, and of course, all the issues related to climate change adaptation and mitigations, with a special focus on indigenous territories, because this constitutes a matter of environmental justice. Thank you.
And since we are short of time, I'm going to introduce André Junqueira, who is also an author of the Science Panel of the Amazon, and he will talk about the Knowledge Dialogues white paper that we've been discussing over the last few months. André.
Thank you very much, Emma. I apologize to my Portuguese only or Spanish only speaking colleagues, but I've prepared this presentation in English. So my name is André Junqueira. It's an honor to be here, and I'm the lead author of this white paper that we are happily launching today, entitled Promoting Knowledge Dialogues in Amazonia, Learning from Best Practices and Experiences. So since its beginning, the Science Panel for the Amazon has been paying close attention to the issue of knowledge dialogues and to the relevance of promoting dialogues between indigenous and local knowledge and scientific and academic knowledge as a very powerful strategy to accelerate solutions for sustainable and equitable development in the Amazon. And this is actually stated in the mission of the panel. And since then, the panel has been producing a number of scientific outputs and white papers and policy briefs, as already been mentioned. And in order to keep on pushing forward on this agenda and to support the implementation of targeted actions to promote knowledge dialogues, and most importantly, to promote the actual engagement and actual participation of indigenous peoples and local communities into science and decision making in the Amazon, the panel has commissioned this white paper that had these two main goals, which were to identify key knowledge dialogues initiatives and actors in Amazonia, and to synthesize some key recommendations or best practices for promoting these dialogues in science and decision making. And in order to do so, we've done a review of published documents and online sources, based on which we've mapped 39 different initiatives. I just want to emphasize here that our intention was not to do an exhaustive inventory of these initiatives, but rather to showcase the diversity of these different initiatives and the key actors involved in them. And we've also conducted consultations with actors directly involved in these dialogues in Amazonia, including indigenous representatives. Gregorio was one of them, but also practitioners, NGOs, scientists, and so forth. And in total, we've conducted 26 of these consultations. And I just want to acknowledge here that although I have the honor and the responsibility of leading this effort, this is actually a collective effort that also reflects the collective view of these people that were consulted. And knowledge dialogues initiatives, they are very diverse in terms of their geographical scope, in terms of how they engage with indigenous peoples and local communities, but also in their main objectives. So most of the initiatives that we've inventoried, they focus on improving resource management or territorial governance, but there are many other objectives of these different initiatives, and very often these different initiatives, they combine multiple objectives into the same initiative. Here you can see a map of these initiatives that we have mapped. So as we were conducting this work, we've constructed a database and an interactive map of these initiatives, which you can access online. There's a link to that in the white paper. So, and this is an interactive map where you can see the detailed information on each one of those initiatives. And based on these initiatives that we've we've mapped, and also based on the consultations with these different actors, there were a number of converging points and arguments. Some of them are epistemological considerations or theoretical considerations. Others are more practical recommendations for how to conduct these knowledge dialogues in more participatory, in more horizontal ways. And we have organized those arguments in the form of 10 different key recommendations, guidelines, and pathways to promote this type of initiatives in Amazonia. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them here. Unfortunately, we don't have time for that, but I invite you to look at the document where each one of those are unpacked. But I just want to highlight a couple of them. So first and foremost, knowledge dialogues initiatives, they should work to safeguard and promote indigenous rights. And this has very much to do with Carmen's one of the main arguments of the previous work that Carmen has shared. Also, we know that Amazonia is home to a very large biocultural diversity, a very large diversity, ethnic diversity, but also diversity of other types of local communities, such as Afro-descendant communities, farming communities, riverine communities, and knowledge dialogues should make sure that all these different actors are represented in these different initiatives. So not to reproduce this historical invisibility of some of these groups. Also the issue of accommodating multiple formats for knowledge exchange, and most of knowledge dialogues, they take place in environments like this one, using languages like this one, and we should more and more promote knowledge dialogues inside indigenous territories using indigenous methodologies for gathering, for sharing information, and for communicating and for co-construction. And last but not least, several of the actors consulted referred to the barriers regarding access to funding mechanisms. So traditional funding mechanisms do not accommodate the certain level of unpredictability that it's inherent to these kind of initiatives. And also the lengthier time period that sometimes is required for these knowledge dialogues to be constructed. I think maybe Anna will talk a bit more about that later, but it's very crucial that we're thinking on designing strategies to overcome this barrier. There's already some interesting initiatives in that sense, but unfortunately they are still not very abundant, and we should be focusing more and more on those. So supporting these dialogues is key to promote sustainable, inclusive, and equitable pathways for Amazonia, and we hope that with this effort we help in pushing forward these knowledge dialogues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, André. And I would like to highlight that we have little cards out there that Gabby can distribute, so you can have access to both the policy brief as well as the white paper. So I am going to go straight to the panel and ask some questions. And I'm going to start with my grande amigo, Gregorio Mirabal, que además...
With my huge friend, Gregorio Mirabal, who is a former member of the strategic panel of the Amazon, and he's been with us since the panel was first created. A question to you, Gregorio. What are the specific policies that should be applied at the national and regional levels in order to foster effective knowledge dialogues, guaranteeing that both local and indigenous and scientific approaches are respected in planning for conservation?
Bueno, saludos hermanos y hermanas.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. I just greeted the Botoja people of the Venezuelan Amazonia and the Wilson people, the brother Wilson of the Regional Organization of Indigenous Peoples of the Amazon, which are brothers and sisters. And I would like to thank Mariano, Carlos, and Emma, and Carmen, and Andres that have addressed these complex issues, and our sisters here. First and foremost, we are here at COP16, and here it says that this is an implementation event. So the first thing that I would like to request from our governments and our collaborators and everyone organizing this IATV space, because I believe that we are here hosted by IATV and all IATV partners, I would like to make sure that this report, as well as all the reports for the Amazonia, well, first of all, the Amazon panel is one of a kind because it is the only science panel that incorporates indigenous peoples and their wisdom. There is a lot of work still to be done. And I was saying that now that we've issued this report, it is important to conduct an evaluation of how we implement this at the universities with the different states. And here in the Cumin Montreal Global Framework assigned by our countries, I believe that this report should be handed to all the presidents in the Amazon basin.
Yesterday, I was saying at an event with universities where they said that the only one who has actually read it is Pedro. The other presidents, like Lula, we should engage in advocacy, and the scientific panel needs to act as a force there together with the partners. The most important issue of this report, which is indigenous knowledge, is that it touches on basically the 23 goals, especially number 3, which is on indigenous territories. But there are other goals that have to do with the youth, with women, conservation, funding, including financing, and benefit sharing, because genetic resources are associated with this as well. So our brother André presented a complex report, and we can say that we have specific knowledge of fish, or we have specific knowledge of insects. We have specialized knowledge on seasons, production seasons, calendars, schedules, summer, winter, fruit. We have expert knowledge, but all of this brings in a more complex component, which is the spiritual component. Nothing will work unless we respect the owners of nature, unless we connect all of this with spirituality and the creators of nature. So it's quite a complex scenario. And for us, it's very difficult to understand biodiversity markets, understanding how genetic resources are going to be valued. It's as complex for indigenous peoples to understand that. So let us all engage in efforts so that this survey and all the other surveys carried out by a scientific panel are implemented in the national plans, right? At the national biodiversity strategies and MBSAPs. We need to include indigenous knowledge as a major component. Otherwise, we won't be able to reverse the situation, and we will all perish as a result of climate change. So, scientific knowledge and indigenous knowledge are key, and they have to go hand in hand at the universities and every other single institution as well. We're going to engage Carlos and Marielo as part of this debate. Today, with the Saracayo people, we launched a climate justice standard for all partners based on what I'm doing. That is to say, mainstreaming spirituality and our knowledge on conservation of all species, mainstreaming our knowledge on the environmental schedule or ecological calendar that we manage. And this is called Climate Justice Standard for Indigenous Peoples. I'm bringing this to the table. The idea is to discuss this as part of this panel and to approve it. Thank you so much.
In that the panel, the science panel for the Amazon, is unique in the sense that from the very beginning has included indigenous people scientists, and we're very proud that the majority of our scientists are from the region. I'm going to go straight to second question to our colleague, Ana Maria, colleague and dear friend, and ask you, Ana Maria, you've been involved in this adventure for a long time. Ana Maria is a lead a lead in the World Bank working primarily in the Amazon. And I would like to ask you, what existing financial instruments and funding mechanisms can be leveraged to support knowledge dialogues and the protection of indigenous territories? And how can this be expanded or improved to enhance their impact?
Bueno, voy a hablar también en español para ayudar a José Gregorio y también porque
I'm going to speak in Spanish to help Gregorio and because I go faster in Spanish. I'm time aware. Thank you so much for the invite. In order to talk about financing mechanisms to promote indigenous people's rights, acknowledgement, and respect, I have to base my intervention in that the best way is to look for mechanisms that are directly accessed by indigenous peoples, as Gregorio was saying, so that they can manage them directly and manage knowledge as well and lead this dialogue. There are many mechanisms, and this is being discussed within the framework of the COP. The IDB is developing a couple of mechanisms. Court from Peru told me that they are also developing mechanisms. And there are many efforts being made. I see Gaia Foundation over there. They are all working in order to create mechanisms to promote and facilitate indigenous communities' leadership of all of these initiatives. So firstly, we need to prevent duplication of efforts and we need to establish synergies. From at the World Bank since 2009, different mechanisms for direct access to resources were created for indigenous peoples. I'm not going to delve into the details because we have no time. But there are 3 mechanisms to such effect. And in addition to that, there are programs such as the one that I coordinate, which is Sustainable Amazon Landscapes. Through the GED, we have promoted different spaces for information and knowledge sharing, and we had the honor to support the scientific panel of the Amazon region for the creation of documents and dialogue on different knowledges. I know that I was trying to go fast, but I only have a couple of minutes left. The idea is to increase the funds for those mechanisms, which is one of our plans. And the bank, through recommendation of policies, is trying to create criteria so that we have highly integrated markets for biodiversity and climate markets, so that those resources that are already in place can reach those who are making decisions so that they can make better decisions. Also, we're developing a fund for Latin American indigenous peoples that would include the Amazon region. We are engaging in dialogue with indigenous authorities in the Amazon region and other countries of Latin America. We're working on recommendations to create a fund that will be customized to the World Bank, but flexible enough to reach local communities. Thank you.
Recommendations are your key messages, so I ask you to be very brief. André, how can knowledge dialogues between indigenous and local knowledge and science contribute to effective conservation in the Amazon?
Thank you, Emma. I think there's practical and an ethical dimension to this issue. I think the practical dimension is the sense that if we adequately explore complementarities between knowledge systems, we can have an enriched picture of complex problems, such as, for example, the impacts of climate change on biodiversity. And based on this enhanced understanding, I think we can promote more effective solutions to conserve biodiversity. So I think the practical dimension is the fact that we can explore complementarities and synergies between knowledge systems to design more effective biodiversity conservation. And I think the ethical dimension of this issue is that we have to recognize, and this has been increasingly recognized, that indigenous peoples and local communities are crucial, have played a crucial role in creating biodiversity, as we know, and in maintaining and conserving biodiversity, as we know. So we cannot think about effective biodiversity conservation without people, without indigenous peoples and local communities. So I think that knowledge dialogues create spaces for indigenous peoples to engage more directly into this conservation because they have the right to do so. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, André. Carmen, how can Amazonian countries collaborate through their networks of indigenous territories and protected areas to strengthen ecological connectivity and effectively address the challenges posed by unsustainable infrastructure?
Gracias. Hay algo que ya empezamos a hacer hace algún tiempo dentro de una alianza de organizaciones de las...
There's something that we started working on through an alliance of Amazon NGOs that work on the territory. And that is to start working together in shared spaces, spaces that are shared not only by indigenous peoples, but that also touch on protected areas and that go beyond borders. I think that we should engage in more dialogue. We need to build on the specific needs of the different regions of the Amazon through information sharing and knowledge sharing. The Amazon region is highly diverse and ecologically diverse and culturally diverse. But we can find parts of the Amazon region that are very well sustained and other parts that are degraded. And this is a problem that goes beyond borders. The actions to be taken, the shared decisions to be taken by different countries to engage in actions through this network of protected areas and territories highly depend on the conditions of each part, each site. So each intervention may differ. It could be restoration services in one area, prevention in others, control in certain areas, bioeconomy in others. So we need to work going beyond borders, and there are already many examples of this type of work.
One question, please go ahead.
Muchas gracias por este panel tan interesante y tengo mucha curiosidad.
Thank you for such an interesting panel. I'm looking forward to reading the paper. After working for many years in the dialogue of different knowledge systems, we know that communities in their own lands have built knowledge systems and make decisions of conservation based on that knowledge. So, what is the value added by science? Why should we engage in knowledge dialogues for indigenous communities that already have experiences? Are we adding any value? How has science contributed to traditional knowledge that was already engaging in conservation without any need for science? I'm being a bit provocative.
Bueno, mi nombre es Álvaro Martínez de la Vega, vengo de País 21, organización en...
What a good question, as somebody once said. I'm the deputy director. I'm Álvaro Martínez de la Vega. This is País 21, a Latin American organization. We work with different organizations, and we're part of the SNTC. And we're going to do as follows. How are you making progress in connecting knowledge systems in such a large region with so many communities for you to have a rapid response or strategy to the deforestation problem, given the large amount of communities with different dialects? Thank you for your question. That's quite an interesting question. We also have new problems and large problems. No knowledge system on its own can bring solutions to them. Many a time, communities have solutions to address new challenges, but when it comes to climate change, even the community leaders tell us we do not know what to do. So complementarities are needed, they are necessary. The value added by science has to do with that, basically. Thirty seconds just to add to your answer. In addition to what André is saying, there are decision makers that do not have the information on what's happening in the Amazon, and they need to make decisions without knowing what's happening. So that dialogue has to do with acknowledging knowledge systems and others who actually need to learn from that knowledge. We are facing such a complex situation. There's no time for discuss. We need to get together. 80 years ago, we were in voluntary isolation. And I wish we stayed in voluntary isolation. But now we're not, and we need to share our solutions and develop them jointly with the scientific world. Many of the Amazon peoples are no longer in isolation or voluntary isolation. We are coexisting in cities or near cities. And what's happening outside is affecting us. So there are issues to which we have no response, and the science does. And the same thing goes the other way around. Many issues that happen in nature we have the solution to, and science does not. So if we do not get together, we won't be able to solve things.
Panel in terms of really the complementarity, the synergy, and the need to work together. It's wonderful to see that the Amazon is rich in biodiversity, is rich in culture, but it's also rich in solutions. And also, if the countries work together, we're definitely going to save the Amazon, and we will build the Amazon we want. Before we conclude, I would like to give the floor now to Carlos Nobre to make the final remarks.
Gracias. Un poco de portuñol, me disculpo.
I'm going to speak Portuñol. The policy brief, the white paper are quite important in that they show the relevance of protected areas, but also of indigenous territories and the indigenous people's knowledge. Gregorio and other indigenous leaders, I have to apologize to you. Why did the settlers come here 500 years ago and totally undermine the knowledge of indigenous peoples? For example, indigenous peoples use over 300 fruits. And we brought fruit from Europe and cattle. There's a lot we need to learn from you. And Gregorio, as you were saying, we need to bring together indigenous knowledge and science because there are members of indigenous peoples that want to add value to industrialize products that arise from science. And that is the way to go. Also, we know that the Amazon is coming close to a point of no return. So, Ana Maria, it is very important to see, as part of COP16, to work on ecosystem services and that all indigenous peoples and Afro-descendant communities should gain full support to sustain these areas. In the case of Brazil, we need to mark or assign large areas as indigenous peoples' territories. But in order to save all the peoples in the Amazon, we need to value this. And we're optimistic that this COP on November 2 will trigger many good conclusions and findings. For example, $100 million in funding, which is a lot to help save all of these communities. Thank you very much.
Of you, I want to thank the panelists, and on behalf of SDSN SPA, thank you very much for coming. And please follow on our website, follow our policy briefs, and all the reports that the Science Panel of the Amazon is producing. Thank you all very much.